Hey, thanks for watching the video. This is a 23 jewel Seiko, and it has definitely seen some hard times. The scratches, the dings, the gouges, the filth on this watch. I would love to know the story behind this watch. Well, today I have my own story on this watch. You know, I'm just a hobbyist watchmaker, and I'm relatively inexperienced. I've only been doing this maybe about a year. This watch I picked up through eBay, and it was listed as parts/for repair. And you know, I found the dial really catching, and I wanted to see what I could do. I had not worked on a Seiko at that time. You know, and in this hobby, you often encounter problems you didn't anticipate, and unfortunately, particularly, I'm guessing with someone like me with little experience, you introduce some problems. So today's video is going to be a little different. In a few seconds, you're going to see the video fast forward through the disassembly of this movement. But don't worry, that is going to reappear at normal speed later on in the video. But I wanted to get to, well, the problem that held me up for months on this watch. So this little spring here in the jewel setting is fairly similar to what you see in a lot of other watches. There's three prongs that you rotate around to the gap to release each of those three prongs that are underneath that ring there. And believe me, these can be tricky enough, as simple as these are. If you look further up, you'll see two other jewel settings there. And they're a little different. They look more like, I guess, Inca block. It's kind of Inca block is really more of a violin shape, and you kind of slide two ends out from underneath a retaining ridge. They sort of flip up. So this kind of looks like that. So that's how I had approached this one, but that's bad. So you actually leave those two prong ends alone. What you're supposed to do is pry this tab here in the center away from the ridge, leaving those two legs underneath the ridge. And what I did was treat it more like an Inca block. So I, long story short, damaged the spring. I ordered one that was as a part, which I overpaid for, and it didn't fit. It was a little smaller. I tried to make it work. I ended up damaging that. I even tried going through some old movements, trying different springs, not really designed for this movement, but just to see if by chance they would work, but there was just nothing there. I wanted to share how to do it the correct way. Now, forgive me for the shake here. I'm trying to hold the phone and record with one hand and do the work with the other hand. But I'm basically just taking the oiler and just prying this lever, or trying to lever this out to get this tab. This tab will pop out. Ideally, if I wasn't recording this, and I did mine off camera when I actually did the real work, I held a little stick to keep those wider legs, to make sure they didn't pop out, because I did not want to have to go through this again. But yeah, you just take the oiler and you just pry, gently pry. It doesn't take much, I promise. I'm doing this one-handed, so you can imagine just how light a touch it takes. But you want to keep those two forked ends underneath the ridge, and it will lift right up. Now, you slide it up out of the way. You can get your jewel out, clean and lubricate it. And to get it back in, you know, you just slide it, its legs back down. And I use tweezers, and unfortunately I can't film that, but I use tweezers, just kind of drag across the top, from the top of the shoulders there, and press down a little bit on that center tab, and it pops right in. So unfortunately, my solution was to find a donor, and here it is. It's actually a 25 jewel, and it's missing the crystal, and the dial is seen worse, but it's in poor enough condition I didn't feel too bad about making it a donor. So we'll open this one up and see how this one looks on the inside. And luckily it is opening up a little more easily than the initial movement. And it's actually pretty nice inside. The balance moves a little bit, so that's encouraging. It wasn't ticking when I would twirl the watch, but seeing the balance move is not a bad sign. So we'll get this rotor off. Rotor screw. And try and gently lift this off. I try to be gentle even with the more robust parts because I don't want to leave a mark, and well, it's just good practice, kind of good coordination practice. Get this movement ring out. This movement ring's a little feisty, but just be patient. Don't super force anything, but you know, just gently pry and feel your way through. All right, let's get this thing out of the case. I like that case style, actually. So maybe we'll find a use for that case at some point. I'm sure I'll save this dial. It's not horrible, but we'll put it in storage somewhere, I'm sure. Little piece of plastic to protect what's left of the dial. No point in creating more damage as we get those hands off. And then we'll work on removing the dial. It's got it flipped over here, and loosen up these dial screws on the side. Lift this up, try and see how stuck the dial is, and it's not stuck at all. It actually separated immediately, which, I don't know, makes me wonder if maybe someone had this off recently. And we'll start on the calendar works, get that off. There's a little beveled clip here, which when you reinstall, to remember to put the bevel side down. I'm going to use a little plastic here to protect the finish as I pry that wheel up, or clip off, and I'm going to let gravity work instead of just the tweezers. And we'll use a bit of Rodico to lift off the day wheel. And I'm going to take these, loosen a screw to the little wheels that actually flip the date. Those two nylon pieces there. You got to be really careful with these because you definitely don't want to damage those, and since they're not hardened steel, just want to be careful handling those. You don't want to mar them with the tweezers. I probably should even be using Rodico maybe, or some other material for the tweezers. I'm going to fast forward through the screwdriver work so that you don't have to watch the back of my hand so much. And we'll slow back down here for the tweezer work. Help you locate those screws in case you're reviewing this before you start your own. One little last nudge on the screw. I'm actually going to use some Rodico. I don't know if it's not unscrewed. It felt like it was unscrewed, but yeah, it was just a little sticky, I guess. And lift off this cover plate. Now, There's a spring right here that likes to pop up when you lift that the date wheel up, so I just had my finger there to kind of hold that, make sure it didn't fly off. I'm gonna go ahead and, oh, you see that spring? I touched it and it wanted to jump. So we might have just got away with one there. You definitely don't want to lose these springs. That's a large one, so that would be not as hard to find. But that's the wheel for the hour hand. Now, I've had these springs fly off, and large and small, and it's no fun getting down the floor to find these little bits and pieces. Remove the cannon pinion. And this little spring here, this little lever's for the quick set for the date. The day and the date, actually. You press it in, it'll change the date. You press it in further, it will change the day. And we'll get this little cover plate off here for the MotionWorks. Wheel here. And there are two screws here that hold this piece. It's a sort of a cover and spring for the setting lever. Wheel here, it's just kind of a little intermediate wheel. I think I'll go for this big spring here. I'm gonna partially loosen that screw on that large spring. Then I'm gonna sort of, feels like you're manhandling this end of the spring, but just kind of pry this out from underneath that ridge there. That's why I like to leave that screw on there, at least part way. And then once I have that tension removed, I can go and remove the screw and reduce the risk of another part flying around. That's the spring that really provides the most of the tension in the MotionWorks. I guess that's Seiko's equivalent to the yoke. Some yoke have a spring that's adjacent to it. That one's sort of built in, which is kind of neat. Quite working for me to get the clutch wheel out. So we'll use some Rodico. Watchmaker's best friend. If I had a dog, I would name him Rodico. And we'll get this little intermediate wheel out. And that's it for the setting work side. So now we'll go over to the train side. The balance first. We saw the balance move earlier, but if you take a close look at this, there's a hint. A hint of what is to come. You know, one thing as a watchmaker, I think early, when you first start, you're in kind of get, you know, the cleaning, and then maybe you start getting to swapping out parts one for another. But the more you get into it, the more you find ways to make the parts that you have work. Man, those guys who have lathes and can just create their own pivots and those sorts of things. That's a whole other level. And I don't know, maybe I'll get there one day, but a lot of respect. Oh, and that's weird. Things were moving around in there. I thought the power had been released already. I thought it was weird earlier. I had taken the hands off and it released some power. That's really unusual, so I'm a little concerned about that. Clicking the pallet fork back and forth there, and it was, there's definitely something not quite right there, but we'll move forward. And work on getting our this wheel here off the barrel. We'll need to get the click spring off, and boy, some swear words flew here. Yeah, that little part there was on the motion work side. I'd forgotten to remove, but yeah, move the screw here for the click spring, and yeah, hopefully nothing got damaged there, but there's the screw for the click spring, and there is the click spring. And we'll zip through the screws here for this bridge to minimize hand time. Work on, I kind of enjoy tweezer work, to be honest. And this is where I try to be really careful, just gently start it, you know, as gently as possible, break the tension of these plates and away from these pivots. Try to lift it up without too much of an angle. Try and lift it up as flat as possible. I'm not always terrific at it. Look at that, the barrel wheel is stuck to that plate. And I probably should have been more careful there. I really wasn't trying to tumble that off. I was actually looking at something and didn't realize that that was so loose. But hopefully no harm, no foul. Get these screws out for the bridge for the pallet fork here. Again, being very gentle. And I'm just really curious and a little concerned about this pallet fork. It seemed to hold power and then not hold power when I would tick it back and forth. And take a look at that. I'm pretty sure that's not right. Yeah, so unless there's some design I haven't encountered yet, I'm pretty sure those stones are supposed to be relatively symmetrical, but that is definitely not symmetrical. You know, maybe it's an opportunity for me to learn how to work with resetting pallet stones. Now we'll work on getting this the center wheel cock off. We'll take this little spring off. That's actually the hack. So when you pull the crown out, it stops the motion of the movement. So it stops the time, makes it easier to set. And escape wheel in our center wheel. We'll work on the flip side of our motion works. This just has like this little, I think they call it the prawl. It's kind of a little, magic lever, maybe is what, don't quote me on that. But yeah, it's kind of like these arms with like a little prongs that clutch sort of grab the wheel so that it helps it, the design allows it to wind both ways no matter what direction the rotor winds in. And just documenting my parts. And this is the disassembled 6106C. Very clumsy along the way. Definitely do yourself a favor and definitely document it as you go, whether it's video or stills, work just fine. And I'll clean these parts and get ready for the next video. In preparation for that, I do like to put the balance back into the main plate. It helps protect it, and I can also clean this more safely this way. I'll also can test it. So once I get this screwed down, I'll give it a puff of air to see how it swings, and then when I clean it, I'll put it into a small jar of isopropyl alcohol just for a couple of minutes. I don't want to do it too long to risk damaging the resin on the impact jewel. So just a couple of minutes, I'll swish it now and again and quickly remove that and let it dry. And the puff of air shows that it does swing. And really this should go for almost a minute if everything's really well, but it's starting to slow down, which teases to the next video. In the meantime, I'm going to clean these parts and get them ready for this upcoming video. We're going to get this watch movement back together and see what we've got. Until then, take care.